I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore, and this is Focus on Israel. Founded in 2005, the Endowment for Middle East Truth is a pro-America and pro-Israel think tank and policy center. EMET, which means truth in Hebrew, prides itself on challenging the falsehoods and misrepresentations that abound in U.S. Middle East policy. Hello, I'm Laurie Cardoza-Moore, and thank you for joining me today on Focus on Israel. In 2005, I founded Proclaiming Justice to the Nations to stop the silence, to wake up Christians and people of conscience to the realities of a world bent on destroying Israel and the Jewish people. From the start, PJTN has had a proven track record of fighting for the rights of Israel and the Jewish people, a record of standing firm in the face of overwhelming odds against a world of Jew and Israel hatred, a record of not compromising on the very plan of God. The mission of this series and PJTN is to educate and equip you so that you can gain knowledge that you can share with family and friends. We'll bring you information and expert analysis that you'll not find in today's media. And our show today is no exception. The Endowment for Middle East Truth has a mission to provide research and analysis to fight misrepresentations and political correctness. EMET has earned a reputation as the go-to people on Capitol Hill for senators and members of Congress who know the importance of a strong and secure America and a strong American-Israeli alliance against the forces of radical Islam and terror. EMET is the only organization which provides monthly seminars for the education of senators, members of Congress, their staff, and the general public. Today, I'd like to introduce you to Sarah Stern, the founder and president of EMET. Prior to founding EMET, Sarah has worked as the executive director for governmental and legislative affairs of the American Jewish Congress, was the national policy coordinator of the Zionist Organization of America, and was a national vice president of WINPAC, a national women's pro-Israel political action committee. She has been responsible for bringing to the attention of Congress many issues that have resulted in the successful passage of legislation. Some have included the Mandel Act, which resulted in the opening of the Office of Justice for victims of overseas terrorism within the Department of Justice, the Taylor Force Act, which resulted in the American government withholding payments to the Palestinians' martyrs and prisoners funds, and amendments to Title VI of the Higher Education Act, calling for a wide range of viewpoints and a diversity of perspectives in the taxpayer-funded Middle Eastern Studies programs. Sarah regularly meets with members of Congress or their staffers, and while in Israel, she meets regularly with members of Knesset, as well as policymakers and thought leaders. She is the author of 2 books, a novel titled Cherished Delusions, and Saudi Arabia and the Global Islamic Terrorist Network, America and the West's Fatal Embrace. She has also written scores of articles that have run in the New Republic, the Washington Times, The Hill, American Thinker, FrontPageMag.com, JNS.org, the Jerusalem Post, the Times of Israel, and the Washington Jewish Week, among other publications. Ms. Stern has also appeared on CBS, MSNBC, and Fox News. Sarah told me how Title VI of the Higher Education Act, which was passed in 1965 to help students fight the Cold War, has been turned into a taxpayer funding source for teacher workshops to teach Islamism.
My name is Sarah Stern. I'm the founder and president of the Endowment for Middle East Truth, or EMET. EMET means truth in Hebrew, and we are an unabashedly pro-American and pro-Israel think tank and policy institute here in Washington, D.C. I first became involved in the situation actually many years ago in 2004, when a friend of mine who was a teacher in Montgomery County Public Schools in suburban Washington took a teacher training workshop that was offered by Georgetown University. This was at the School for Muslim Christian Understanding, and it was taught by John Esposito, and they were using a curriculum guide to help teachers in the kindergarten through 12th grade level. And this curriculum guide was absolutely astounding to me, that not only did they teach Islam in the public school, they had verses from the Quran, which they encouraged students to learn and or memorize. There were lesson plans on how to turn your classroom into a mosque. There were lessons about the pillars of Islam. And there were lessons that were incredibly anti-American and unabashedly anti-Israel. And this was taught as though it was the truth. And I did a little bit more digging, and I found out that this was all part of Title VI of the Higher Education Act, which was passed in 1965. And that was in the height of the Cold War, when people here in Washington realized that our American students were woefully ignorant to compete against the Soviet threat. So they allotted a sum of money, which has constantly been growing, for regional studies centers within the college campus. So we now have Middle Eastern Studies Centers, African Studies Centers, Asian, Latin Studies Centers, you name it. But I only really delved into the Middle Eastern Studies Centers because that's my area of passion. Now for several years we've known that most professors have a very anti-Israel and anti-American bias. In fact, there was a study written about 3 years ago where they said that if faculty were allowed to ask a question before they hired a professor, if they were a Democrat or a Republican, they would, of course, prefer Democrats because they like-minded faculty. But what's even more pernicious to me is that in order to get the funding for these programs under Title VI of the Higher Education Act, you have got to do teacher training workshops. So I call this trickle-down propaganda. And in these teacher training workshops, the book that's most often used is a book that's put out by the Middle Eastern Studies Association and AWAR, which is, both of them are funded by Saudi Arabia, and it's called Audrey Shabaz's The Arab World Studies Notebook. And in the Arab World Studies Notebook, not only are there chapters on teaching Islam, but there are also horrific chapters about Palestine. And in the whole section on Palestine, there's poetry by a poet called Mahmoud Darwish. One poem is called Identity Card, and one of the paragraphs of the poem is, "My grandfather planted these olive vineyards, but the state has uprooted them, and now my son can never harvest them." And there are terribly biased things. And, you know, I find it incredibly pernicious that this is going to our impressionable and vulnerable children, students, American students from kindergarten through 12th grade. And I really do believe this has to stop. There are foreign agent registration acts already on the books. Many universities are being funded by the Saudis. This particular, the Arab World Studies Notebook is funded by the Saudis. It's funded by both Saudi Aramco and the government of Saudi directly. And I feel Saudi Aramco plus the government studies funds the Middle East Policy Council that is totally funded by the Saudis. Now, we have found out that the Qataris have recently, as of 2009, have been doing this to the tunes of, hundreds of millions of dollars a year. I would like to propose, and I've started talking to members of Congress on Capitol Hill about this, that no foreign government should be funding any education that's going to American students. I'd like people to introduce a bill called American Education for American Students, and I think it should be illegal. No government, even the government of Israel, which I know is a very wonderful government, should really be involved in educating American students.
I want to take you to Israel in pictures and film. I want you to see how God's sovereign hand can be seen before our eyes right here in this land. That's why PJTN is offering a special anniversary package that includes a captivating new book and award-winning DVD. Israel Rising is a unique visual story of Israel's miraculous journey from unforgiving desert to thriving nation. Thousands of years ago, the prophet Ezekiel foretold a future time in which the arid land of Israel would come alive for its people. Now this breathtaking book documents the fulfillment of this vision, as rarely seen photographs from the 1880s to the 1940s are juxtaposed with recent photos of the same locations. This book will inspire and captivate you as it illuminates Israel's foretold awakening in a new and unforgettable way. In addition, you'll receive the award-winning documentary, Israel Indivisible: The Case for the Ancient Homeland. This inspiring film examines the many political twists and turns that make Israel the world's most controversial nation. From Abraham and the Promise to the issues facing the Jewish state today, the film examines the historical, archaeological, legal, and biblical foundations for the modern state of Israel. This is a limited time offer for these two remarkable resources for just a one-time gift of $70 today. Your generous donation will help ensure that PJTN stays on the front lines and in the headlines of all the important issues facing Israel and our Jewish brethren. So please go to pjtn.org today. From studying history, it's very clear that what starts with the Jews never ends only with the Jews. We must strongly stand against any anti-Semitic trends, for if not stopped, they'll cause harm to all of us, and we'll witness the downfall of our Judeo-Christian Western culture. Today, many people say there's no longer a need for a Jewish state, that Jews around the world no longer need a place of refuge. But anyone who has heard recent statistics about the worldwide rise in anti-Semitism would never make such a claim. The reality is that neo-Nazi groups and Nazi sympathizers are increasing around the world. Surveys show that over 1 billion people in the world harbor anti-Semitic attitudes. Close to 50% believe that Jews have too much power in the business world, and 2/3 of the world's population has never heard of the Holocaust or believe the historic accounts of it are inaccurate. Don't let yourself be manipulated by evil people with a wicked agenda. When the self-serving villains are in control, good people from all religions suffer. Muslims, Christians, and all people of conscience should stand proudly and show respect for a country that gives so much to the world in so many ways. Do your part, do your research, and do what you can to make a difference. Because what happens in Israel does affect us all. This is not just a Jewish or just an Israeli problem. This is a problem for all humanity, for each and every one of us who believe in freedom and human rights. Learn more about what you can do at pjtn.org.
When people really want to get important work done on Capitol Hill, they know who to come to. They come to EMET. And they come to EMET because it is effective, because members and staff on Capitol Hill, the executive branch, and other prominent influence makers respect EMET and want its input. They want to hear what EMET has to say. That is why, when people who have lost loved ones through acts of Palestinian terrorism and seek justice for their loss, they come to EMET. That is why, When people want changes in the United Nations Relief and Works Agency textbooks that indoctrinate Palestinian children to despise Israel and kill as many Israelis as possible, they come to EMET. That is why, when Americans learn about the potential sale of military hardware to Turkey under the increasingly Islamist and authoritarian grip of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, they come to EMET. That is why, when ethnic and religious minorities such as the Kurdish population in Syria, who had shed their blood together with ours fighting ISIS, and felt that the United States had abandoned them, they came to EMET. That is why, when people are incensed that colleges and universities in our country are spewing Islamic extremism and anti-Israel education, they come to EMET. That is why, when President Trump announced the U.S. Embassy move to Jerusalem, journalists know to come to EMET for a view that is not necessarily popular in Washington. And journalists seek the EMET voice on other issues. People know that EMET is a stalwart advocate for truth. EMET has earned its reputation as the go-to organization for Middle East policy issues in Washington. By challenging the pervasive falsehoods that abound about the Middle East, it promotes a secure America and a strong U.S.-Israel alliance. Indeed, EMET has pledged to do everything in its power to advocate policies that keep Israel strong and secure. And because Israel is the greatest national security asset for the United States in that troubled region, EMET knows that a strong Israel is key to supporting a strong United States. EMET boldly informs, educates, and corrects the record even when doing so is unpopular. It holds meetings with congressmen or their staffers several times a week, and hosts in-depth, timely, and informative seminars and briefings on the Hill each month, often with critically important figures. And for those who aren't inside the Beltway, EMET holds scheduled telephone seminars with prominent individuals on the call, writes white and research papers, and publishes articles in prominent journals. We are passionate about our work. We believe in our mission. We know there is much to be done, and EMET is here to do it.
But please know that I'm deeply honored that EMET has named me a Speaker of Truth this year.
Anytime I need ideas about how we can press the case of national security, this is one of the first places that we go.
We need organizations like EMET that are fearless in exposing the lies and standing up for the truth.
We thank you for joining us this evening and for being part of our effort to shine the light on the truth. Your voice is absolutely crucial to our mission to spread the EMET, the truth. Our ability to succeed, our ability to look to a peaceful future and a continued sustained bond between our two nations requires your support.
Sarah Stern has fought against the influence of foreign agents and countries in our schools for years. She told me what she's been doing in this battle and how you can help. As citizens of the U.S. or whatever country you live in, it is your duty to protect the young minds that will someday be sitting in seats of influence and power.
To me, this is incredibly important because I think the most regnant ideas that a person has are formed during those formative years in the classroom. And just like we put our hands on our chests and said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag and believed in it, this indoctrination lasts a lifetime. And if they're taught to memorize these poems, that will last a lifetime. And Audrey Shabaz's book, by the way, The Arab World Studies Notebook, first was published in 1991. So by now, some of these young students who've been indoctrinated in that fashion have already reached adulthood, and many of them are in positions of power. There are thought leaders. Some of them might be our senators and congressmen, or journalists, principals of schools. And, it is just a shame. And I feel that it is no wonder that by now, even though there's horrific warfare going on in Syria, North Korea is like one great big concentration camp. There are refugee crises all over the world. The one nation state that young students feel that they have to rally against is our one little cherished democratic ally, the State of Israel. And I think it's because they have already, by the time they go to the university campus, they have already been indoctrinated with this sort of propaganda. One thing is, I've started talking to members of Congress, and I have to say, in all fairness, there's a wonderful woman named Tammy Benjamin from the AMHA initiative that I'm working together with. And Tammy wrote a wonderful letter signed by, I think, 70 pro-Israel organizations. I'm sure Proclaiming Justice Among the Nations is one of them, talking about this issue where people who have gotten the money, professors and universities who have gotten the money, signed this academic boycott of Israel. So they're very upset about this, and they say the objective of a university is knowledge and truth. And if you're boycotting one of the regions that you're studying, that's not the pursuit of truth. That's not the pursuit of knowledge. So that's one aspect of this. Is I have been on Capitol Hill asking members of Congress to sign this letter. We sent it to the Department of Education, and unfortunately they sent back a very standard form letter saying, oh, we now are asking people to write an essay to say what you're doing to have a diversity of perspectives, and that somehow seems to satisfy, their responsibility. So I feel that members of Congress, writing to Secretary Betsy DeVos might have an impact. That's number one. Number two, I believe very, very strongly in American education for American students. And I think it should be illegal for any foreign government to be able to fund the hearts and minds of any American student. The whole reason why Title VI of the Higher Education Act was first conceived of and appropriated, the money was appropriated, was so that our students would be able to compete then against the Soviet threat, but also the original legislation was called the National Security Education Act, and that was to raise students that would want to serve in the national security interests of this country. I'm afraid that after reading some of the materials that they get, they're more likely to want to serve in Al-Qaeda or ISIS than for our own national security interests. And on top of all of this, this is brought to you at taxpayers' expense. So, ideally, I would love to take the program away altogether and just have, foreign language maybe taught through the Department of Defense for, students that are going into that area. But there's too much prejudicial baggage that accompanies, the language instruction as it is in the regular universities. And ideally, I would love the teacher training workshops to be eliminated, because our children's minds are the most valuable, precious things that we have. And we just cannot use this as a vehicle to poison our children's minds against both the United States and the State of Israel. America has been asleep at the wheel of history. Our parents fought against the Nazis or the communists. The real assault on Western civilization right now comes from the world of radical Islam. And we are willfully blinding ourselves to this, and we're allowing our children to be brainwashed. So how are they going to prepare to fight against the Islamic Republic of Iran, or Turkey or Qatar or any of the other egregious nations that really despise the West and particularly despise America and Israel? This issue is incredibly serious, and I need everyone to please talk to your congressman, talk to your senator, let them know that Title VI of the Higher Education Act is actually funding an indirect way into our children's minds, and they're turning us against the core values that we believe in as Americans. And we are going to be disarmed. You know, I think that the world of radical Islam is very, very strategic and farsighted, and they have been planning this for a very, very long time and have found out different vehicles to disarm us. And I feel that we have got to understand as Americans, as patriots, you know, as lovers of Israel, if you are, that this is something that will turn our children against us. People don't understand the importance of ideas. Ideas resonate. Nobody is born wanting to strap a belt of dynamite around their waist and be a suicide bomber, but that's because of the education that they have gotten. And now we're seeing that in our own American schools, there's an education that certainly is indoctrinating people to hate Israel, and we have to do something about it. So talk to your member of Congress.
Well, that's our program for today. And I want you to know we appreciate your support. The time to take a stand is now. Be a leader in your community and in your church. One person can make a difference. Get involved with and support pro-Israel organizations such as PJTN. Call your senators, congressmen. Let your elected leaders hear from you. Visit our website to learn more. Sign up to receive free action alerts and order our films to share with family and friends. Please encourage everyone you know to tune in and become informed. God bless you, and thank you for all you do on behalf of our Jewish brethren and all Israel. We'll see you next time on Focus on Israel.
To support this program, send your tax-deductible gift to Proclaiming Justice to the Nations, P.O. Box 682711, Franklin, Tennessee 37068. You can also support PJTN online. Visit pjtn.org or call 1-877-873-9020.
Anti-Semitism has reached epic proportions, and Israel is now surrounded by nations who seek its destruction. For Israel to lose just one battle would mean losing everything. As Christians, it is our biblical responsibility to stand with our Jewish brethren and Israel. PJTN needs your help to reach more Christians with this urgent message. Please visit our website to become a member today and order our award-winning documentaries. You must decide that you won't be silent. Sign up now at pjtn.org. God bless you, and thank you for your support and prayers.